Yo, what is up YouTube? I'm Blitz5 and I'm back yet again with another PUBG Xbox update patch notes video. So that was a mouthful, but this was the big update that we've been waiting for at the end of June. Last week we had a couple of unexpected hotfixes that came through, and while we're on that topic, those hotfixes, especially the one on June 20th to reduce memory leaking, really seemed to have a big impact for a lot of the community on Xbox here, and including myself. So since that update on June 20th, I've actually yet to crash in the game. Hopefully I don't jinx myself there. And I don't think any of the players that I've been playing with have crashed either. And this is a huge improvement, especially for myself, because I have the original Xbox and I was literally crashing at a rate of one out of every 3 games. And sometimes, I would play a couple games and wouldn't crash. Then other times I would crash multiple times in one game. Even if I restarted my Xbox, usually that wouldn't help. So this is a big improvement. And on the back of that, we have today's patch, which is entirely focused on optimization and stabilization. No additional content is being introduced with this patch. So this is basically quoted directly from the Xbox community manager who posted this on the official PUBG forums and also on Reddit. So in regards to timing, this patch is already out by the time you're watching this video. So if you haven't downloaded it yet, go ahead and do so. And in terms of this video, I'm just going to be doing some high level explanation and summary of what's going on here. If you want to read everything line by line, definitely go ahead and check out the links in the description box below, like I mentioned. First off is stability. But one thing I noticed here is that almost everything in this patch is revolved around optimizing the game and reducing the amount of memory things take, which they're optimizing everything to basically improve stability. So it's almost like everything is an optimization, which then is going into stabilizing the game. So you'll see what I mean here in a second. So under stability, they wrote that they made 2 changes have been made to reduce crashes related to being out of memory. So if you've listened to my previous videos or if you're aware of what's going on with PUBG, basically one of the biggest issues is that we're running out of memory, and that's causing us to crash the game because they've gone on to explain that when you're playing PUBG, there's a lot of stuff to load, and they're loading everything within a 1 kilometer radius of you. So you're loading other players' inventory, you're loading when people are getting shot that you've never even seen yet in the game if they're 1 kilometer with a radius within your area. And so there's a lot of stuff going on even if you don't really realize it, right? So what they've said here is that they've optimized the total amount of memory required by both maps. So they're just dropping the amount of memory it takes to load all of the maps and everything on the map. So they're optimizing that, which is bringing stability, and then they're optimizing the UI, which is in case also bringing more stability. So it's just funny to say that that's under the stability section, okay? You're going to hear a lot of stability and a lot of optimization in this video. Then we've gone on to the optimization section. Just like I said, there's just a lot of different things going on here. It's one of the things I found the most interesting, this is kind of skipping ahead, is that they've reduced the impact or the loading of if you were to shoot a tree off in the distance, it would load the bullet holes there, right? But if you're on the other end of that, if you're a player in a house and you can't see that tree or you can't see that side of the tree, they're not going to display the bullet impact on that side of the tree, which I thought was really funny. It's kind of like one of those things, if a tree falls in the woods, does anybody hear it? And if nobody's there, does anybody hear it? It's like an old saying. So basically, that's how far they're going with the detail of reducing everything in this game to the point where they're going to reduce the bullet impact of a bullet that nobody can see, and it will only load for those who are actually looking at it, which is really crazy that they're getting that deep into the code. I mean, like I said, I'm not experiencing that, but I imagine that that's got to be a big thing. And they said just looking at that, the sheer amount of bullets that have been shot in the game that people aren't seeing, within a 1 kilometer radius, there's a lot of bullets being shot in a 1 kilometer radius. So reducing this actually makes a big impact, which is shocking to me. So they're also working on character movement, which has been optimized just to make sure that they load less of the character, less of the inventory. They're optimizing the resources to make sure that, when you hit menu, that you don't crash. That doesn't bring up any memory issues. They did something with the vehicle locations here. So they have to refresh all of the vehicle locations and constantly load the active vehicles to make sure that they're ready to be used and work when you get in them. So what they did is they optimized that, and then they also reduced the vehicles that aren't moving, like the ones that are blowing up. They made them load less stuff or constantly refresh. They reduced all that stuff just to make it easier when you're driving by or walking up to those vehicles. You've definitely seen it, or unless unless you have an Xbox One X, that's like perfect. But when you walk up to some of the vehicles, they're like still kind of rendering, kind of weird. Hopefully that is kind of improved. Then also the vehicle effects. This is a huge thing. I mean, I've crashed so many times driving. Every time I used to drive, I used to fear crashing. So they've optimized this while you're driving to all the loading effects. And there's a lot of the game loading as you're driving fast down the game. So they've worked on that. They mentioned the bullet impact. I already talked about that, but that's really interesting. Then they have the character shadow rendering. So this is something they seemed kind of reluctant on because they tried to make the shadow as accurate as possible in both shape and movement, they said. But they said it was also having a negative impact on performance, so they kind of reduced the shadow. So I wonder, how that is. They're trying to make the game as realistic as possible, but they also want to make sure people aren't crashing. So this is obviously something that is constantly having to be loaded while you're walking around. So I'm okay with having a less realistic shadow if I don't crash as much, because I really haven't ever seen somebody by their shadow, or that hasn't really made a huge gameplay impact on me ever, I don't think. I don't know how it really could. And then they also optimized the terrain and grass on both maps to increase performance. They've also made a few changes to the jumping and landing phase of the game. So they said here that parachutes have been optimized, now using less resources. They've also optimized the physics while free falling, but there's really no explanation to what's going on here. And then something interesting they wrote here is that they've changed it to where you can't be killed while you're free falling. And they admit that the odds of this happening are extremely rare. I never even thought about this, but I mean, I don't know how you'd even be able to do this. You'd have to get to the ground, get a gun like a sniper rifle or like a SCAR, and then shoot off into the distance and randomly hit somebody, because you can't even really see them free falling. So the odds of this happening, very, very, very rare, pretty much impossible, they said. But doing this, making it so the person cannot be killed, reduces the amount of coding that it takes, like why the person is dropping. It reduces the amount of resources, I should say, not coding. I'm sure it's probably part of it, but it reduces the amount of resources that that character needs to load while they're free falling. So it should just optimize the game. So summing up all this stuff here, well, they fixed a couple bugs here. They fixed a bug when there was footsteps weren't being heard after aim down sight, and they also fixed where the position of a teammate would sometimes display incorrectly on the mini-map. Just two small bug fixes, but I normally don't like to cover those. I don't even know if I've had this happen to me. But to summarize all this stuff, it's really, really crazy to me. It blows my mind every time. And I've learned so much from reading all of these PUBG patch notes, how much stuff is going on in the game. You really don't think, when you play a video game, you understand there's been a lot of coding and a lot of developing that's been going on to it, but you don't realize that it has to code just to allow you to take damage and how that damage happens. There's so much coding on your character alone, on top of the map and every other player, that there's just a lot of stuff going on here. And I get when people criticize this stuff because Fortnite has the same amount of players and a similar size map, a little bit smaller, right? But there definitely has to be a difference between the kind of realism of PUBG, which I know the graphics aren't great, and kind of the color shading, more cartoony graphics of Fortnite. But either way, there's definitely something going on here that created all these problems, and I think we just need to understand that PUBG isn't, a powerhouse AAA studio. Anyways, I know a lot of people are complaining these should already be fixed, but it looks like we're heading in that direction. Just to add some of my personal opinion and kind of ramble on here, which I like to do at the end of these videos. It's interesting to see, when I started playing, the game was okay in February. That's when I started playing PUBG. Then some of the patches in May brought the game down a little bit worse than it was before, crashing worse than when I started. And then it's having a big upswing right now. And it seems like they're doing more updates and things that I've ever noticed in the past. So what I would like to do is after playing this for a couple days, I think I mentioned at the beginning of the video, but I'd like to make kind of like end of the June state of the PUBG game going into July, because you never know. This patch seems like it's great, but it could backfire and send the game to crash even more like it did in May. But it seems like a lot of that stuff has been fixed and we're going in the right direction. So it's been a pretty interesting ebb and flow of PUBG so far, and with the rumors of people leaving the game and venting their frustrations, a lot of stuff is going on, but I don't know how you could really complain about all these patches coming in. It seems like they're doing a lot of stuff. There's been so many things happening in June on both Xbox and PC that this is pretty incredible right now, and I know I'm following it a lot, so maybe it seems like it's more than it is, but there's been a lot of videos on this. So anyways, if If you want to check out any of my previous PUBG content, go ahead. I've talked a lot about all of the updates over the past month, and I'll be obviously continuing to post PUBG footage. I just created a PUBG Facebook page, or a gaming Facebook page for myself at Blitz5, and I also have this PUBG Instagram account, which I'll link all down in the description box below if you guys want to go ahead. Follow me there for daily PUBG content and try to post as much as I can on here. So as always, thank you all for watching. I'm Blitz5, and peace out. Fuck 'em.